1, 2, 3, 4. I should have tested this ahead of time. My friends, microphone, USB microphone. I think you can hear me, correct? If you can't, let me know. We're going to have the chat open. Looks like we're live on all the different channels. Looks like it's working. I'm going to do a quick sound check here over on Amazon. I got that open. So if you guys, let's see here. Why is it not starting, huh? I do got it going. Where's the button to start it? Okay, we are live on YouTube. Well, it looks like people are tuning in over on Amazon, but I can't tell why I can't play it. Well, anyway, we're going to get started here. We want to talk about the ever-changing landscape when it comes to marketing. And what's interesting, guys, that I want to share with you here, I'm still baffled by why it's not working on Amazon, but people are tuning in. Maybe because we started too early. I don't know. That's the world of live streaming, but it is working on the other channels. Looks like everybody is tuning in. Really appreciate you guys tuning in for sure. And we want to talk about the ever-changing world of marketing. Things are certainly evolving. Things are certainly getting harder and harder. And what's interesting to me is, analytics. Somebody said this the other day, and they were talking about how analytics have helped marketing survive. And I think that's true to an extent. But sometimes we also overthink all the analytics, right? How many people are watching? How many people are paying attention? How many people are doing certain things, et cetera, et cetera? And that's just something to keep in mind. So use metrics to be smarter, to use things better, and to drive more performance. And tomorrow, we're going to live stream this over here on all these different channels. We have a webinar coming up. And I hope you join me. You can sign up down there at the bottom. You see the URL, WebInsights.com. I do appreciate WebInsights for sponsoring and supporting today's episode and partnering with me on this project. Tomorrow on that webinar, we're going to talk about what can you do to stay more relevant. So we'll talk about some of the trends you're seeing. We're going to talk about some of the impact that has changed, what has driven the highest impact out there, and also how are you going to be more successful. How do you allocate demand gen budget by channels? That's an interesting one. And the experts tomorrow, I'll be interested to hear what their thoughts are on this topic. And my thought, really quickly, I'm just the host tomorrow. But today, I'm sharing some thoughts here. Why not, right? I think you have to have an integrated strategy, quite frankly. I think that's what it comes down to, in my opinion. How do you fit it all together? Not just per channel, but how do you make sure you're using your content everywhere, you're using your different, you have impact everywhere, wherever people are. And that's one reason why I'm such a fan of live streaming, because here's what I'm doing. So we got this show going right now. We got it going to LinkedIn. We got it going to YouTube. We got it going to Twitter. It's going everywhere, right? And at the end of the day, I'm hitting all these different channels on social already. Then I'm going to take the audio. I'm going to put it on my podcast channel. That's going to go out in a little bit. And after that, sometimes I write an article. In this case today, I'm probably not going to write one just because of the workload today and timing and other things. But make it all part of your overarching strategy. Yes, I get it. The bigger we get, the more siloed we get, the more people we have focusing on specific things. But the more the team can work together, the more helpful it can really be for the overarching strategy, for the overall campaign, for the overall output. So that would be my recommendation. So tomorrow on the webinar, let me just tell you who we have on the show. There's some big names. I'm excited to talk to them. We're going to start at 11 o'clock Eastern time. That's 4 p.m. in the UK, 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. on the West Coast in the US, a little early, but it's worth getting up for, seriously. Plus, aren't you all still working at home anyways? We have Darrell Alfonso. He's a thought leader out there, and he is with Amazon Web Services. So, definitely connect with him. I've connected with him a long time ago. Great thought leader out there. I'm glad to have him on the show. Amy Kelly, she's with UserTesting, B2B marketing in startups, how to scale up, demand gen specialist, PR, events, value-led content. You had me at a low. Value-led content, definitely appreciate that. That's how all content should be. I was just talking to Neil Schaefer earlier on his podcast, and we talked about crap content really annoying to people. You don't want to create that. No, our conversation was not crap, but we mentioned that you do want to have value-led content. It has to have value, quite frankly. Qualitative feedback, the voice of the customer. I am a big fan of that. In case you weren't aware, I run content strategy at VoxPopMe, voxpopme.com. Check them out. They also got a fantastic live stream and podcast, Real Talk. The Customer Insights show. Check that out. Jen Vogel hosts that every week with great guests. I do produce that behind the scenes. But basically, that's what that is about. How do you give a voice to the customer? How do you get good video feedback? How do you get good feedback from customers using video feedback to do that? So definitely worth checking out, in my opinion. Of course, qualitative feedback in the voice of the customer, understanding different audiences, and localization. That's also a good topic to keep in mind, especially when you are in multi regions, right? Now, you don't need to necessarily update your content per se, depending on what it's for, SEO content, for different countries with the same language. But if you have different products, in the UK, you want to make sure people get that content. Then the next, we have Mark Baker. Mark is with Oracle, marketing ops expert and leader. So we're looking forward to having him. And then Christa Elizabeth Norton, Capita. Hopefully I say that correctly. Account-based marketing, industry marketing, experimenting with one-to-one and one-to-few. That is an interesting comment. One-to-few. So usually we hear the term one-to-many, but Christoph focuses on one-to-few. So I assume that means we have the same message for a limited number of accounts in our ABM strategy. So we'll find out more about that tomorrow. If you want to join us, I hope you do on the webinar at that time. We'll also talk about events. So events is interesting because I'm tired of them. There's so many. There really are. Too many events. I sign up for an event and then something else happens as I'm hopping on the call, as I'm going into the Zoom invite, or if I'm going into whatever they're using, Hey Summit or whatever, and I get a Slack message from the boss, for example, or somebody else, somebody important in my life. And, it's like the first excuse not to attend, right? Because guys, did I lose you here? My internet just The beauty of live streaming. Okay, no, I didn't. We're still here. So that's just something to keep in mind when you create events. How are you gonna make sure you close the gap between registration and attendance? And it's hard. And I think part of it is you got to do more channels. That's what we're doing right now. I'm doing a live stream about a webinar. I think it's going to be a good one. I'm going to be the host. So what do you expect? Haha. But seriously, how do we close the gap between registrations and attendance? The other thing is it comes back to your goal, right? Do we want reach? Do we want leads? I've actually done a webinar before where pretty small number of people showed up, but a relatively good number of people registered. I didn't care. My goal was to drive leads. And all the people that signed up, guess what? They were leads. And, that's all I was after. I wasn't after reach in that scenario. Now, on these live streams, I'm after reach, right? The more people watch, the more people listen on the podcast version, the better. I'm going after, this is brand awareness, right? That's really what we're trying to do here. And it's different when I do a webinar, right? So, but what's interesting to me, it took me a while to get that into my mind, quite frankly, because I thought everybody needed to show up. So I'm sure the experts tomorrow have a lot more insightful thoughts on that topic than what I have right this second. But sometimes the attendance doesn't matter. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the registration matters, that the people gave you their email and you can still follow up. And the other thing is you want to have stuff be ready on demand. I mean, I could talk about this topic all day in case you didn't notice that. But because what's interesting to me about that, the whole attendance watching of anything, is who wants to show up on time? But in general, so even if you miss us tomorrow, we will have the replay available. It'll be available. You can watch it later. You can ping me later. You can ping the friendly faces at WebInsights.com later. They'll get you the recording. If you didn't get it, you can still register. You get the replay. Not a problem at all. So there is Jane. Let's see here. Hold on. I'm going to show you this quickly. So I just figured this out. I use Restream, as you can see. So Jane has a question. Boom. There it is. Jane, on what network are you on, Jane? I can't tell. LinkedIn, I think, right? LinkedIn. In here on Restream, you can put up the comments. So I think that's super awesome. Jane, appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you asking a question. If you're listening on the podcast version, you can't see the comment, of course, but any stats on how many register and then watch on demand. So I don't necessarily have the numbers for webinars, but I do have the numbers for my live streams. And I can tell you this. So if we have, let's say we got, I don't know, 1,200 people watching. Kind of looks like we might have that many. It's kind of hard to estimate because people go in and out, and I don't have all the metrics in front of me right this second. We will probably get at least that many more later, on the replay. So that's why it's so important to not just create stuff in the moment, but actually create content that is relevant down the road. So as I'm just talking about the different topics, people can learn from that later. So absolutely, make sure you have content that's engaging while you're live, but also have content that can be replayed later. So I'll give you an example. I'm doing this right here, and then I'm also doing the podcast. I mean, it can't just be in the moment. The podcast won't publish for a little while, so we want to make sure that we have content that's still worthwhile later on. Really appreciate your comment, Jane Weber Brubaker. Thanks for tuning in on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, put them over there in the comments and I'll try to answer them. I do have to kind of have that up here to make sure I see them. Really appreciate you asking that question. Let's see what else. Trade shows. We're going to talk about trade shows. What do you do now? I don't know if that's where that question is going to lead us, but something to think about, right? Trade shows are still on hold. I guess I just looked at Content Marketing World. That looks like it's going to be held in October in Cleveland. So October might be good. I still have a conference coming up in Madrid in May, and that seems to be on track. That seems to be happening. So I don't know. I don't know where that cutoff is to virtual conferences versus, in person. Now, I do have a family trip planned in March. We're going to plan on taking that. But of course, we're just sitting at the pool. We're just doing nothing. It's nothing. And then I've seen another conference. I think Podcast Movement might be planning on doing on virtual, not virtual, on site. So that should be coming up in August. So something to think about is, how do we make these conferences engaging? How do we, how do we do that? The one conference, really quickly, I'm going to just mention that quickly. If you guys want to check it out, if you are into Insights, it's actually the virtual Insights Summit. Don't have the link. I don't have the link right here in front of me. Didn't pull that up before the show. But if you want the link, let me know. Just send me a message, ctrap@gmail.com. Happy to send you the link to that show. Hope you're going to join us next week, or not next week. Who knows what day it is, honestly. But hopefully you join us tomorrow. We're going to talk about all these different topics. How do you stay relevant? How do you live in this ever-changing landscape? What I'm going to find interesting from the panelists, I'm going to ask them this tomorrow if I remember. Hopefully I do. Is, are we just talking about the changing landscape because of COVID? Or are we talking about the changing landscape because of everything? Do you know what I mean? Or are we talking... Because the landscape changes all the time. So why are we doing a live stream today? I'm a podcaster. So here's the reason we're doing a live stream. Because what I realized is that a lot more people watch the live stream as opposed to listen to the podcast. And my podcast, my friends, has actually been relatively successful. 150,000 downloads or something like that. And what's interesting about that is I'm not unhappy with it, but I'm always looking for new ways to reach people. And, I do, if you guys aren't aware, my new book is coming out. If you are watching on Amazon, it is at the bottom there in the carousel. If you want to check it out, it does talk about how to go live, how to get more out of your podcast. And I would actually recommend that people use live streaming as another way to reach people. Now, is live streaming more popular today than it was before COVID? I don't know. I really don't know. And I don't know. We should talk about that tomorrow. Are we talking about the changes in the marketing landscape only because of COVID? Or are we talking about the new marketing landscape that has been accelerated? The change has accelerated because of COVID. So have you seen that Tom Fishburne? The Tom Fishburne cartoon, where it's people in an office and they're saying, we have time. We got time. We have time to be innovative. to push digital transformation. And then you got the wrecking ball coming in of COVID. So certainly COVID has impacted all of us. I don't know if live streaming has changed quicker because of COVID. I don't know if podcasting has changed quicker because of COVID. So I'd be interested to hear their thoughts tomorrow to find out what they're thinking. Is it only because of COVID, or are things just always constantly changing? I don't know. It seems to me before COVID, stuff was changing all the time too. So I don't know if it's COVID only. I don't know if we're going to focus on COVID only, but I'd be interested to hear their thoughts on that. And then, of course, what's interesting too, maybe not interesting, but disappointing kind of, or surprising, COVID has dragged on for a long time. So I was speaking at a conference last year in March when all this started. And what's interesting to me is they said, should we just reschedule to a couple months from now? And they didn't. Good for them, seriously. A couple months later, this crap was still going on. And here we are almost a year later, right? It's February now. And this all started in March, full throttle, so to speak. How much longer will it go on? And how much longer do we have to think about it? So probably still will be a while. But we will talk about all those things tomorrow. We'll dive into the topic. We only got an hour. So make sure you join us. Make sure if you have questions, you bring them. You ask them early on. You can ask them on the webinar platform. You can ask them on the channels. And certainly I hope that you join us. If you have any other questions, feel free to tweet at me at ctrap. You can email me, whatever. I'm easy to find, quite frankly. You can send a message to the crew over at WebInsights.com, and we'll go from there. I do appreciate WebInsights.com for supporting today's live stream and business storytelling podcast, and of course, hosting tomorrow's webinar. The guests, the hosts, the panelists, really looking forward to hearing from them. I'm not going to be speaking as much tomorrow. That's why I took my turn today. I'm just asking the relevant questions tomorrow. I'm the host. I'm the interviewer. In case you guys didn't know this, I grew up in the journalism world. So I grew up as an interviewer. That's kind of what I've done. And looking forward to the discussion. Really got a great crew lined up. Gave you some of my thoughts on some of the things that I think we will discuss. Other things will come up. I love the art and science of follow-up questions. So I'm sure I'll have some of those. And 10 a.m. Central, 11 Eastern, 4 p.m. in the UK tomorrow on all these different channels. Please register. Please join us if you have questions. Let's talk about them. What's interesting too, I want to mention this, as I'm seeing people are still tuning in. So we'll stick around here for a little bit. It seems like I've talked a lot today. Whew. I think a big thing about the changes, honestly, is your mindset. How do you have the right mindset? And what's interesting to me, sometimes it's easy to overreact. Oh my goodness, we have so much work to do. That's good. We're so busy. Do we get this done? How do we do it? Et cetera, et cetera. And so much can go wrong. We're not hitting today's MQL goal. We're not doing this. Where did all the website visitors go? And we just have to take it in stride. And in my last book, not the current one, not the Going Live one, but the one about content performance culture, I call it the next play mentality. And what I talk about when I mention the next play mentality is that we need to always run the next play. This podcast seems to be performing pretty well right now. And so I'm going to keep talking, right? Because you guys are still tuning in. Why would I leave for a couple minutes? And But if it wasn't performing, I might just call it off, right? If people weren't tuning in, if it wasn't working. And we would come back tomorrow and we'll do the webinar tomorrow and see, if that works better. So it's just something to keep in mind, how we move forward. And in the content performance culture book, I call that the next play mentality. And what's the next play mentality, you might wonder? Here's what it is. I'm not a Kansas City Chiefs fan, but Patrick Mahomes, fantastic quarterback. What does he do? He has a 42-yard loss on a play. He gets up, he comes back, and he runs another play. That's the next play mentality. And funny thing is, when he did that play, this actually happened, right? You guys might remember that from the season. He came back and he tweeted about it. He says, well, it always works on, it works on Madden. Haha. Have a little bit of sense of humor. Why not? And so that worked for him. He ran the next play. The next play, I'm sure, was good or better. And what else does he do? He has a good play. He throws that touchdown to Ty Hill, and Ty Hill does a backflip in the end zone. He comes back and he runs another play. It's always the next play mentality. So I'm a big fan of that when it comes to our content performance culture, our marketing culture. Things change all the time. So 28 minutes, my friends, of me talking here about tomorrow's topic. I am out of breath, in case you can't tell. I need a drink. I need a snack. And I'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. We'll ask all these questions and more of our fantastic guests. You can check them at the link before. Darrell Alfonso, Amy Kelly, Mark Baker, Christa Elizabeth Norton. Looking forward to them. Amazon Web Services, UserTesting, Oracle, and Capita. I don't know how you pronounce it. I should have asked about that before I said it out loud, but check them out at the link below. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Let's see if there's any other last-minute comments. There are not. We want to be successful. All of us do, right? And the way we can be is by using the right tools, by using the right mindset, by moving forward with the next play mentality. That's the way to do it. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll hear from those fantastic experts. I've said my piece. That's all I got. I don't have anything else about the topic. So tomorrow, I will just ask the questions. Until then, I'm Christoph Trapp, your host here and author of Going Live stream your podcast to reach more people, which is kind of what we're doing right now. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys, and see you tomorrow.